Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Alaris Vane ran through the human city as rain cut down in silver lines, her breath tearing her chest apart. Neon lights blurred into streaks of red and blue as her boots slapped wet pavement, every sound too loud, every scent wrong. Oil, metal, fear. Behind her, the bond burned like a living thing, pulsing with a name she refused to answer. She had crossed the boundary at dawn, ripped through the veil that separated worlds, and still it followed. The alley narrowed. Brick walls closing in, trash bags splitting under her hands as she stumbled. Shame pressed harder than exhaustion. She had fled her pack in front of the moon court, fled the word mate spoken like a sentence. She remembered the silence when the elders turned to Calum Ryder, waiting for him to reject her. He had not defended her. He had not moved. That stillness broke her more than any howl. A siren wailed nearby, sharp and human. Alaris ducked behind a rusted fire escape, chest heaving, rain soaking her hair into her eyes. She whispered a plea to no God at all. Just let him stop. Let the bond break. The city answered with footsteps, calm and unhurried, stopping just beyond the corner. She pressed her palm over her mouth to keep from making a sound. The bond tightened. Not violent, not cruel, just true. It whispered of pine and frost and the familiar weight of him standing still. Calum did not chase. He never had. That hurt worse. Alaris edged away, shoes sliding, and burst onto a wider street crowded with late-night vendors packing up carts. Steam rose from grills, mixing with rain, laughter floating careless and bright. Humans brushed past her, solid and warm, unaware of the predator threaded through their midst. She ducked between them, heart hammering, senses overwhelmed. The bond flared again, closer now, steady as a drumbeat. She smelled him then, impossible through the chaos. Cold air, steel, home. She spun and saw him across the street, dark coat soaked, hair plastered to his brow, eyes fixed only on her. He didn't reach out, didn't snarl. He simply watched, as if waiting for permission to exist. Rage flared hot in her chest. She turned and ran again, down stone steps into the underground, where the roar of a train swallowed her sob. Doors slid open. She leapt inside as they closed, cutting the world cleanly in two. The train screamed forward, lights flickering, metal shaking beneath her feet. Alaris clutched a pole, vision tunneling, every muscle trembling. The car smelled of damp coats and electricity. Humans stared briefly, then looked away. In the dark window, her reflection looked feral, eyes too bright, jaw clenched to keep from shifting. She slid into a seat and folded over, breathing through the pain of the bond stretching, thinning, but not snapping. Memories clawed up unbidden. The night of the claiming moon, when her skin had burned and her wolf had surged, when she had felt Calum's presence like gravity. The elders had circled them, robes whispering, eyes cold. Nixa's smile had been sharp with triumph. Unfit, someone had murmured. Wrong-blooded. Alaris had waited for Calum to speak, to choose her aloud. He hadn't. Silence had sealed her fate. The train slowed. A station light flared, doors opened, and there he was again, standing on the platform as if the city bent to place him there. Their eyes met. The bond roared. Then the door shut, dragging her away while he remained, unmoving, watching. When she stumbled off the train hours later, the sky was paling, rain thinning to mist. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with brick houses and trees shedding water from their leaves. Birds argued overhead, sharp and alive. Alaris collapsed onto a stoop, knees scraping stone, exhaustion finally winning. She scrubbed her face with shaking hands, wiping blood from her lip where she'd bitten down too hard. This place felt softer, human, possible. She could vanish here, take a name no one knew, work until her hands ached, sleep without howls. The bond loosened, like it was giving her room to breathe. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up. She already knew the rhythm. Caleb stopped a respectful distance away, close enough to feel, far enough not to threaten. "I won't force you back," he said quietly. His voice was rough, worn thin by night. "I won't speak for you in front of those who hurt you." A bitter laugh tore from her throat. "You already let them," she said. The words landed hard. He inhaled, shoulders tightening. "I failed you," he admitted. "I came to do better." She stood slowly, legs steady despite the ache, and finally faced him. Without moonlight, he looked almost ordinary, just a man soaked through, eyes dark with something dangerously close to regret. The bond hummed between them, not demanding, only waiting. Alaris searched his face for lies and found none, which frightened her more. "You followed me into the human world," she said. "Why?" He didn't hesitate. "Because running doesn't erase what's real," he answered. "It proves it." A bus hissed nearby. Somewhere a door slammed. Life moved on, indifferent to destinies unraveling on quiet streets. Alaris turned away and started walking, not fast, not slow. She counted her steps, daring him not to follow. 1, 2, 3. The bond warmed. Behind her, his footsteps matched her pace, careful, giving space, refusing to disappear. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew he would keep choosing her, step after step, in a world that didn't care who they were. Fear shifted into something sharper, fragile and bright. The night released them into morning, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morning in the human world arrived without ceremony. Alaris walked until her calves burned and the city fully woke around her. Storefront lights clicking off, delivery trucks coughing awake, the smell of bread and wet leaves filling the air. Caleb followed at a distance that felt deliberate, never close enough to touch, never far enough to vanish. That space between them pulsed with unsaid words. She hated how careful he was now, how gentle. It felt like an apology she hadn't agreed to hear. They stopped near a narrow street lined with old brick apartments. A handwritten sign hung in a window. Room for rent. Alaris stared at it like fate daring her. She could choose this. A door opened nearby and a woman stepped out. Gray hair pinned back, eyes sharp but curious. "You look frozen," the woman said, human warmth cutting through Alaris's fear. "Both of you." Alaris answered before thinking. "I need a room." Caleb stiffened but stayed silent. The woman studied them, then nodded. "Name's Maribel Knox. Come inside." Alaris crossed the threshold without looking back. The bond tightened. Caleb followed her into the building, into her choice, into a world with no pack laws to hide behind. The room was small but clean, with a single bed, a window facing a maple tree, and the hum of a radiator that felt like safety. Maribel laid out rules briskly, rent paid weekly, no trouble, no excuses. Alaris agreed to everything. Caleb stood by the door, hands loose at his sides, gaze lowered in a way that twisted something sharp in her chest. When Maribel left, silence filled the space. Alaris turned on him, anger flaring because it was easier than fear. "Why didn't you stop them?" she demanded. The words burst out, months old and poisonous. "When they said I was wrong. When they laughed." Caleb closed his eyes once. "Because if I spoke then," he said quietly, "they would have killed you." The answer landed like a blow. Alaris staggered back, breath catching. "That's a lie." He shook his head. "They were looking for an excuse. My defense would have made you a target." He met her gaze at last. "So I chose silence, and I chose a plan." Rage cracked, letting grief seep through. "You chose them," she whispered. His voice broke. "I chose time." They existed in uneasy orbit for days. Alaris found work at a cafe 2 streets away, hands learning the rhythm of cups and machines, the comfort of being useful without being judged. Humans smiled. They complained. They tipped. No one smelled her fear. Caleb took work unloading trucks at night, muscles straining under fluorescent lights, sweat masking his scent. They shared the room without touching, slept in shifts, the bond stretched thin but steady. At night, memories surfaced uninvited. Luneth Hollow under moonlight. Nixa's knowing smirk. Elder Veilthorn's cold decree. Caleb watched her wake from dreams. Fists. Clenched and said nothing unless she spoke first. That restraint was its own torment. On the fourth night, rain returned, tapping the window like claws. Alaris broke. "What was your plan?" she asked into the dark. He didn't pretend not to hear. "Expose the elders," he said. "Prove they were breaking Mooncourt law." She laughed bitterly. "And while you gathered proof, I bled," Silence answered. Then, softly, "I know." The danger followed them quietly. A man lingered across the street too often. A scent brushed the air that didn't belong to humans. Alaris felt watched, her wolf pacing beneath her skin. One evening, she caught Kylam staring at the door, jaw tight. "They've crossed," he said. "The pack isn't supposed to hunt here." Fear iced her veins. "Nixa?" He nodded. "And torn ashfall." The names tasted like ash. Alaris's first instinct was to run again, but the room felt like a promise she refused to break. "What do we do?" she asked. Caleb finally stepped closer, stopping a breath away. "We stand," he said. "Together, if you'll let me." The bond surged, warm and aching. Outside, footsteps passed. A shadow paused. Alaris swallowed, then nodded once. "No more silence," she said. He exhaled, relief sharp and real. Thunder rolled. The human world slept, unaware that old laws were about to shatter on its concrete. The confrontation came at dawn. Nixa appeared by the maple tree, beautiful and cruel, Torn flanking her like a blade. "Come home," Nixa called softly. "You don't belong here." Alaris stepped onto the stoop, heart pounding, Caleb at her side. "I choose where I belong," Alaris said, voice steady. Nixa's smile thinned. "You can't hide behind humans forever." Caleb moved then, placing himself between them, eyes burning. "You will not take her," he said. "The Mooncourt will hear what you've done." Torin laughed. "In a human street?" Sirens wailed in. The distance. Nixa hesitated, calculating. Alaris felt the bond lock into place. Not a chain, but a shield. "Go," Nixa snapped finally. "This isn't over." They vanished with the morning fog. Alaris sagged, adrenaline draining. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying without claiming. She looked up at him, seeing not a failure, but a man who had followed her into exile to finish a promise. The chapter closed with sunlight, breaking through clouds, fragile and defiant. Alaris did not sleep after Nixa vanished. Dawn stretched thin and pale across the room, light pooling on the floor like spilled milk, and every sound made her flinch. The city felt too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers twisting together, wolf restless beneath her skin. The confrontation had cracked something open. Running was no longer an option that tasted sweet. It tasted like surrender. Caleb moved carefully behind her, giving space, always space. That restraint, that pressed on her nerves. "If they crossed into the human world once," she said finally, "they'll do it again." He nodded. "Which means the elders are desperate." He told her then what he hadn't before, how he had hidden records, testimonies, proof that the Mooncourt had allowed bloodline purges in secret, how Nixa's family benefited, how silence had been his shield while he gathered truth. Each word felt like a stone laid carefully between them. Alaris listened, anger shifting shape, becoming something sharper and more focused. "You should have trusted me," she said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I didn't trust myself not to lose you faster." The honesty hurt more than lies ever could. They left the room before noon. Alaris refused to wait like prey. The cafe owner noticed her hand shaking and sent her home early, with a look that held concern but no questions. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds stacking heavy and bruised. Caleb led them through back streets and parks, places where cameras thinned and trees whispered. "There's a relay point," he said. "A neutral ground the moon court still honors." Alaris scoffed. "Honors when convenient." Still she followed. They crossed a footbridge over brown water, wind tugging at her hair, the city skyline jagged ahead. Halfway across, the bond flared sharp and hot. Alaris stopped. "They're close." Caleb turned, scanning. "Two," he said. "Not Nixa." The air thickened. From the trees stepped Torin Ashfall and another wolf she barely recognized, eyes flat, mouth set. "You're making this harder," Torin said. Alaris felt fear coil, then burn away. "Good," she replied. Caleb shifted his stance, protective without touching, a silent vow. The fight was fast and brutal, contained by shadows and the roar of wind. Torin lunged. Caleb met him head-on, bodies colliding with a crack of bone and breath. Alaris dodged the second wolf, pain slicing her arm as claws grazed skin. She tasted blood and fury surged, wolf snapping awake. She struck back, learned strength finding its mark. The bond sang, sinking them. Movement, answering movement without words. Sirens wailed closer. The wolves faltered, torn between law and instinct. Caleb slammed Torin into the bridge railing, voice low and lethal. "Leave," he said, "or I end this here." Torin's eyes flicked to Alaris, to the city, to the consequences. He spat and pulled back. "This changes nothing." They fled into trees, leaving silence and rain. Alaris sagged against the railing, arm burning. Kellen was at her side instantly, hands hovering, asking without words. She nodded once. He tore his sleeve, bound her wound with shaking care. "You okay?" he asked. She met his gaze. "I am now." They reached the relay point by dusk, an abandoned greenhouse choked with vines. Glass panes shattered and glowing amber in the low sun. The air hummed with old magic, thin but present. Alaris felt it prickle her skin. Inside waited Eileen, the healer, eyes tired but kind. "You shouldn't be here," Eileen said softly. "Neither should the hunters." She cleaned Alaris's wound, herbs biting and cool. "The cord is fracturing," Eileen continued. "Whispers everywhere." Alaris watched Caleb as the healer spoke, saw the weight he carried, the cost of plans made alone. "If we speak now," Alaris said, testing courage, "will anyone listen?" Eileen met her gaze. "If you speak together." The words settled deep. Outside, thunder rolled. Caleb reached for Alaris's hand and stopped himself. She closed the distance instead, fingers lacing with his. The bond eased, glowing warm. It wasn't forgiveness. It was alignment. "We go to the court," she said. Caleb nodded. "At dawn." The decision rang like a bell. Night fell hard. They slept on opposite sides of the greenhouse, exhaustion claiming them despite fear. Alaris dreamed of running no more. She dreamed of standing. When she woke, rain had washed the world clean. Sunlight filtered through broken glass, scattering gold across leaves. And Caleb was already awake, watching the horizon like a man waiting for judgment. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you don't owe me your forgiveness." Alaris considered him, the man who followed, who fought, who waited. "I owe myself the truth," she replied, "and I won't be silent again." They stepped out together as the city stirred, bound not by destiny alone, but by choice, sharpened through fear. Somewhere beyond concrete and trees, the moon court waited. And this time, Alaris would not run. The path to the moon court cut through forgotten land, where the human city thinned and the old world pressed back in. Alaris felt it with every step, the air growing cooler, heavier, threaded with memory. Trees leaned close, bark scarred with ancient marks, leaves whispering in a language her bones understood. Caleb walked beside her. Now no longer behind, their shoulders nearly brushing. The bond between them felt steadier, less like a wound, and more like a scar learning its strength. By the time stone pillars rose ahead, half swallowed by ivy and moss, her heart hammered, not with fear, but resolve. Wolves gathered in the clearing, shapes resolving from shadow, murmurs rippling as eyes turned toward her. Some faces held curiosity, others carried open disdain. Alaris lifted her chin. She would not bow. The elder sat upon carved stone, robes pale as ash. Elder Velthorn's gaze fixed on her like a blade. "You broke sanctuary," he said. "You fled your fate." Alaris stepped forward before Caleb could speak. "I survived your judgment," she replied. The clearing stilled, tension coiling tight as breath before a storm. Whispers surged, sharp and angry. Nixa stood among them, confidence worn like silk, her smile small and knowing. Alaris felt the old humiliation rise, then burn away. She refused to look. Down. "You claim law," Alaris continued, voice steady. "Yet you sent hunters into human lands." Gasps rippled. Elder Soren leaned forward. "That is a grave accusation." Caleb moved then, pulling a bundle from his coat, laying records at the elder's feet. "Testimonies," he said. "Names, dates, proof." Murmurs turned to shouts. Nixa's smile faltered. Valthorn's eyes darkened. "You would shame this court?" he demanded. Alaris met his gaze. "You shamed yourselves." The words rang loud, shocking in their simplicity. The bond pulsed warm at her back, Caleb's presence unwavering. For the first time she felt the court listening, not because she was chosen, but because she stood unbroken. Thunder rolled above the canopy, echoing the shift inside her chest, from fear into something fierce and alive. Nixa stepped forward sharply. "She lies," she snapped. "She corrupted him." Fingers pointed. Accusations flew. Alaris felt the pull to shrink. Old habits clawing. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the smell of earth and rain. "Ask them," she said, gesturing to the gathered wolves. "Ask whose blood was erased. Ask who benefited." Silence fell, thick and dangerous. A young wolf spoke hesitantly, then another. Stories surfaced like ghosts dragged into light. Elder Merrick rose, face pale. "Enough," he said. "This court will not ignore such claims." Velthorn slammed his staff, fury cracking through composure. "You invite chaos," he snarled. Alaris stepped closer, voice low but clear. "You already did." The ground seemed to hum beneath her feet, ancient magic stirring as if approving her defiance. Caleb watched her with something like awe, pain, and pride tangled tight. Nixa's eyes flashed with hatred, calculating retreat. The balance had shifted, not resolved, but cracked wide enough for truth to bleed through. The court recessed as storm rain began to fall, heavy and cleansing. Wolves scattered into clusters, arguing, whispering, choosing sides. Alaris stood beneath the trees, soaked and shaking, adrenaline ebbing fast. Caleb approached slowly, careful not to overwhelm. "You were incredible," he said quietly. She laughed once, breathless. "I was terrified." He nodded. "You still stood." That mattered more than praise. Eileen appeared, concern etched deep. "You've started something that can't be undone," she warned. Alaris wiped rain from her eyes. "Good." In the distance, Nixa watched, expression cold and sharp, promising more pain ahead. The storm raged, thunder cracking the sky, as if the world itself argued alongside them. Alaris felt the bond settle into place, no longer a question. She turned to Caleb. "If this ends badly," he cut her off gently, "I'll follow you anywhere." The words didn't bind, they offered. She accepted them anyway, heart fierce and open. When night fell, the court announced judgment delayed until dawn. No verdict, no chains, just waiting. Alaris lay beneath the trees, cloak pulled tight, staring up at fractured stars. Sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of running, then stopping, of hands reaching without grabbing. At dawn, horns sounded low and mournful. Wolves gathered again. Velthorn's face was carved stone. The court acknowledges wrongdoing, he said stiffly. Gasps broke the hush. Those responsible will be stripped of authority. Nix's breath hitched, fury naked now. And the bond? Alaris asked quietly. Elder Soren met her gaze. It stands. Freely chosen. The words landed like release. Alaris closed her eyes, emotion flooding sharp and hot. Calem's hand found hers, this time without hesitation. She squeezed back, grounding them both. The past did not vanish. The scars remained. But something irrevocable had changed. She had run once. She would never need to again. The court's decision did not bring peace. It brought a fragile quiet that felt like standing on a ice too thin to trust. Alaris sensed it the moment they left the clearing, wolves watching from the trees, expressions split between respect and resentment. The elder's words echoed in her mind, freely chosen, beautiful, and terrifying. Choice meant responsibility. It meant blame could no longer be deflected onto fate. As they walked back toward the city's edge, Calem stayed close, not guarding but present, his steps matching hers. Nixa won't accept this, Alaris said. She never loses without tearing something down. Calem nodded. Power doesn't surrender quietly. They crossed into human streets at dusk, the smell of food carts and exhaust grounding her again. For a few hours, she almost believed they could rest, almost believed the worst had passed. At the cafe, her co-workers joked, unaware of how close the world had come to breaking. She smiled when expected, hands steady by force of will. When she returned to the room, Maribel was waiting, eyes sharp. Someone came looking, she said. Didn't like my answers. Fear slid cold through Alaris's veins. The danger hadn't stayed in the forest. It had followed her home. That night the bond buzzed with warning. Alaris woke before the sound, glass breaking softly like a held breath finally released. She rolled from the bed as the window shattered inward, shards glittering in moonlight. Calem was already moving, a blur of motion and instinct. 2 figures dropped into the room, fast and silent. Wolves, Nix's allies. The fight was chaos contained by narrow walls. Alaris grabbed a chair, swinging hard, pain exploding up her arms as it connected. One attacker went down snarling. The other lunged for Calem with a silver blade flashing. Alaris screamed his name as blood sprayed dark against the wall. The bond flared white-hot. She moved without thought, wolf surging forward, strength answering terror. She drove the attacker back, forcing him through the broken window with a cry that ended too abruptly. Sirens wailed almost immediately. Too loud, too fast. Nixa wanted witnesses. The remaining wolf fled as police lights washed the street blue and red. Alaris dropped to her knees beside Calem, hands slick with blood, heart stuttering. Stay with me, she whispered, panic stripping her voice bare. Humans filled the street, shouting, recording, asking questions no one could answer. Paramedics pushed inside, voices brisk and practiced. Calem was loaded onto a stretcher, pale but breathing, eyes fixed on Alaris with fierce intent. Don't disappear, he murmured as they wheeled him away. The words anchored her through the chaos. At the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed endlessly. Alaris paced, clothes stained, hands shaking despite her wolf's demand to run. Detective Elias Crow appeared, eyes keen and suspicious. You want to explain why people keep breaking into your building? He asked. Alaris met his gaze steadily. Because some people don't like being told no. It was only half a lie. Hours crawled by. When a doctor finally emerged, relief crashed through her so hard she had to brace against the wall. He'll live, the doctor said. Alaris sagged, breath shuddering out. When she was allowed to see Calem, she took his hand carefully, fear loosening its grip just enough to feel everything else. Guilt, love, fury, determination. Recovery was slow and dangerous in its own way. Calem healed faster than any human should, which raised questions. Crow watched too closely. Nix's shadow lingered everywhere, a threat without a face. Alaris slept in a chair by Calem's bed, refusing to leave. In the quiet hours, truth finally spilled without anger to fuel it. I thought I could protect you by staying powerful, Calum admitted softly. I didn't realize power without courage is just another kind of cowardice. Alaris squeezed his fingers. And I thought running was freedom, she said. It was just fear in motion. They didn't promise forever. They promised honesty. Outside the window, the city pulsed, alive and unaware, a place where choices mattered more than bloodlines. When Calum was discharged, they returned to the room together, bruised but standing. Maribel hugged them both without asking questions. That simple kindness nearly broke Alaris. Safety, she realized, was built from moments like this, not decrees from distant courts. The next message came before dawn, a symbol carved into the maple tree outside, deep and deliberate, a challenge. Alaris traced it with trembling fingers, recognizing Nixa's mark. She wants the old laws, Alaris said quietly. Trial by dominance. Calum's expression hardened. In the human world, that's war. Alaris straightened, fear transforming into resolve. Then we end it, she said, not with hiding, not with silence. She looked at him, the bond warm and steady. With witnesses. The plan formed, quickly, dangerous and necessary. Expose everything. Force the court to choose publicly. Nixa had brought the fight into the open. Alaris would finish it there too. As the sky lightened, she felt the weight of what lay ahead and the strength she'd earned by running once and then stopping forever. By midday, the city felt like a stage set for judgment, every sound sharpened by nerves. Alaris stood at the cafe window, watching clouds stack like bruises, phone heavy in her pocket. Messages had gone out to every contact Eileen trusted, to neutral wolves, to humans who filmed everything. Witnesses were the shield. Calum rested at the small table, pale but upright, refusing rest, eyes steady. Detective Crow's card lay between sugar packets, a promise and a threat. Alaris breathed through the bond's hum, anchoring herself. She remembered running through rain, the alley's stink, the terror of being unseen. Today, she would be seen. Maribel locked the door early, nodding once, brave as inhuman. Outside, footsteps gathered. A presence pressed the air, familiar and sharp. Nixa's challenge was spreading. Alaris straightened, fingers flexing, wolf alert but leashed. We don't fight alone, she said softly. Calum reached for her hand, squeezing once. Sirens wailed somewhere distant, a reminder of consequences. The bell over the door chimed. Cameras lifted. The trial had come to the human world. Alaris felt fear thin into focus, a blade she could hold, and stepped forward as murmurs swelled around them, with resolve burning bright inside her. Nixa entered without haste, confidence polished sharp, eyes glittering at the lenses pointed her way. Torrin flanked her, bandaged pride barely hidden. Trial by dominance, Nixa announced, voice smooth. Accepted, Alaris replied, loud enough for microphones. Gasps rippled. Crow pushed through, jaw tight. Any violence, and this ends, he warned. Alaris nodded. Witnesses decide. The circle formed. The street, chalk lines drawn by trembling hands, humans filming, wolves bristling. Rules were spoken fast. No killing. Yield ends it. The bond steadied Alaris's pulse. When Nixa lunged, it was all speed and cruelty, claws flashing. Alaris absorbed the strike. Pain ringing, then countered with balance learned through fear. They circled, breath steaming. Nixa taunted, words cutting deeper than claws. Alaris answered with silence and footwork, letting cameras catch restraint. Calum watched, teeth clenched, trusting her strength. A sweep took Nixa down. She rose snarling, rage cracking polish. Alaris waited, then ended it cleanly, forcing the yield. The street erupted with noise. Proof captured from every angle. Humans shouted questions, wolves stilled, and the city recorded a law rewritten by courage rather than blood. Alaris breathed. shaking, knowing nothing could be hidden now from either world, watching eyes everywhere tonight together. Nixa did not accept defeat quietly. As Crow moved in, she smiled for the cameras and slipped away into the crowd, promise of return etched sharp. The court could not ignore this now. Messages exploded across networks, proof traveling faster than wolves ever could. Alaris felt the aftermath like a tide, exhaustion heavy but clean. Caleb reached her side, careful, proud, relief breaking through control. "You chose restraint," he said. "They saw." She nodded, knees weak. Sirens faded, the circle dissolved into chatter and feeds. Later, in the quiet room, they counted bruises and truth. Uilin called, voice fierce with hope. "The elders are convening publicly," she said. "Today." Alaris laughed, a sound edged with tears. "Good." Detective Crow returned the card to his pocket. "Stay available," he said, not unkind. When the door closed, Alaris leaned into Caleb's shoulder, letting herself shake. He held her without claiming. Presence steady. The bond warmed, not triumphant, simply real. Outside, the maple's carved mark seemed smaller, already fading. Choice had rewritten destiny, and Alaris felt taller inside, anchored by courage, earned through pain and patience. She closed her eyes, breathing steadily, trusting the world would finally listen to her truth now fully. The public court convened in a converted hall, banners replaced by screens, ancient oaths spoken into microphones. Alaris stood at the center, spine straight. Caleb beside her, hands linked openly. Elders spoke, witnesses testified, recordings played without mercy. Nixa was summoned and denied, absence loud as guilt. Authority shifted in real time. Titles fell, reparations named, protections declared for borders and bloodlines alike. When Velthorn's voice cracked, Alaris felt no joy, only closure. The bond thrummed, calm and bright. The verdict acknowledged harm and choice, dissolving forced claims. Applause rose. Hesitant, then strong human and wolf together. Alaris exhaled years. Caleb squeezed her hand. "You led," he said. She shook her head. "We did." Outside, rain broke again, washing chalk and old marks from stone. Crow watched from the back, thoughtful. Island wept openly. The city streamed it all. For once, truth did not need shadows. As they stepped out, Alaris felt lighter. Not because pain vanished, but because it was finally believed. The hall hummed with relief and anger alike. History pivoting while futures recalculated under relentless light. Alaris stood steady, accepting complexity, choosing forward motion over fragile comfort and silence with courage, learned slowly through loss and love. Night settled gentle and earned. Back at the room, Alaris packed nothing, realizing she no longer needed escape routes. Kellum watched, smiling small. "Stay," he said, question and offer combined. She answered by leaning into him, choosing. The bond bloomed, warm and quiet, no commands, only consent. Outside, the maple stood unscarred, bark healing. Maribel left tea at the door. The city breathed. Alaris thought of the girl who ran through rain and forgave her. She thought of the man who followed without forcing. Tomorrow would hold work, healing, and building something honest. Tonight held rest. She closed her eyes, listening to shared breaths, heart steady. Freedom, she learned, was not distance. It was being seen and choosing to stay. Beyond the window, the city lights flickered like constellations, ordinary miracles promising continuity, reminding her that lives rebuild in small, stubborn increments, with patience, kindness, and courage, practiced daily by imperfect people everywhere she looked at last tonight together here. Alaris smiled, finally certain the chase had ended, not because one surrendered, but because both chose the same ground, where love could stand without fear or chains ever again in daylight and dark, learning to live honestly together at last. Morning returned quietly, as if the city itself were unsure whether it was allowed to. wake after everything that had been exposed. Elleris stood by the window, watching steam rise from grates and people hurry with coffee cups and backpacks, ordinary life stitched stubbornly back together. The world hadn't ended. That felt strange. Caleb slept behind her, breath slow, healing still tugging at his body. The bond between them was calm now, a low, steady warmth instead of a scream or a pull. It unnerved her more than chaos ever had. Calm meant space to think, and thinking brought questions she could no longer outrun. The court's ruling had shifted power, but it hadn't erased resentment. Wolves still watched from the edges of the city, careful, calculating. Humans still didn't know the full truth. Elleris touched the glass, grounding herself. She wasn't prey anymore, but leadership had found her anyway. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Eileen. They're fracturing. Some want you to speak again. Others want you gone. Elleris exhaled slowly. Choice always demanded a cost. She turned as Caleb stirred, eyes opening, already searching for her. It's not over, she said quietly. He nodded. No, he agreed. But it's different now. They walked the neighborhood together, daylight exposing what night had hidden. The maple tree stood whole, its bark already knitting where Nyx's mark had been carved. Children played on the sidewalk, laughter sharp and bright. Elleris felt something twist in her chest at the sound. Protecting futures suddenly felt personal. At the cafe, Jonah Pike leaned across the counter, eyes wide. You see the feeds? He whispered. People are asking questions. Elleris nodded. They should. Outside, a small crowd lingered, curious rather than hostile. Phones lifted, murmurs followed her steps. She kept her chin level, refusing to shrink. Caleb stayed at her side, presence steady but not possessive. That mattered. By afternoon, tension crept back in, prickling her skin. The bond hummed A, warning she recognized too well. She's close, Elleris murmured. Caleb's jaw tightened. Nyxa won't come alone. They turned down a quieter street, senses sharp. A figure detached from the shadows ahead, then another. Neutral wolves, faces guarded. One spoke. Some of us want protection, he said. Others want blood. Elleris met his gaze evenly. I won't give you either, she replied. I'll give you choice. The meeting that followed was uneasy and raw. They gathered in a small community hall, folding chairs, scraping floors, humans and wolves sharing space with careful distance. Elleris stood at the front, heart pounding, throat dry. This was harder than fighting. I won't lead a pack built on fear, she said, voice carrying despite the tremor. And I won't hide in the human world pretending this doesn't affect them. Murmurs rippled. Someone scoffed. Someone else nodded. Caleb spoke next, owning his failures aloud, refusing excuses. That honesty cracked something open. Questions followed, accusations, confessions. By the time Nyxa arrived at the door, slipping in like poison on silk, the room was already changed. She laughed softly. You think this ends me? She asked. You're standing on borrowed ground. Elleris didn't rise to the bait. No, she said calmly. I'm standing where I choose. Nyxa's eyes flashed. She lunged, not with claws, but with words, naming old secrets, dragging shame into light. Elleris absorbed the blows, refusing to deflect. When silence fell, heavy and stunned, Nyxa realized too late she'd lost control of the room. Witnesses mattered. Context mattered. Truth mattered more. Nyxa retreated with venomous promises, but the damage was done. To her. To the old narrative. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with something like cautious hope. Elleris sagged into a chair, exhaustion hitting hard. Caleb knelt beside her, concern naked. You didn't have to carry all that, he said. She met his eyes, steady. I know, she replied. But I wanted to. That choice settled deep, anchoring her. Later, as dust painted the sky bruised purple, Detective Crow appeared again, less sharp now, more thoughtful. You're changing the rules, he said. That draws attention. Alaris smiled faintly. Good. He nodded once. Call if it gets ugly. When he left, Caleb exhaled. You scared me, he admitted. She leaned her forehead to his. Me too. The bond warmed, no longer reacting to danger, but sharing it. Outside, the city lights flickered on, and Alaris realized she wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She was building something fragile and necessary, one honest moment at a time. That night, sleep came heavy and dreamless. When Alaris woke before dawn, clarity sat sharp and bright in her chest. She knew what Nixa would try next. Old law. Final claim. A spectacle meant to force submission or blood. Alaris stood and, dressed quietly, resolve settling in her bones. She woke Kylam with a gentle touch. She'll challenge me publicly, she said. He nodded without surprise. Then we answer publicly. They stepped outside as the sky lightened, city breathing around them. Fear flickered, but didn't take root. She had run once. She had stopped. Now she would stand again, not because destiny demanded it, but because the future did. Somewhere nearby, Nixa waited, sharpening her last move. Alaris squared her shoulders and walked forward, heart steady. The chase was no longer about escape. It was about ending things cleanly, in the open with no shadows left to hide in. Dawn broke like a held breath finally released, pale light washing the street where barricades had been dragged into a rough circle. Alaris stood at its edge, coat buttoned to her throat, hands steady despite the tremor beneath her skin. Cameras were already raised, humans gathered with curiosity sharpened by rumor. Wolves lingered, at the margins, sensed tight with anticipation. This was the spectacle Nixa wanted, a public forcing of old law, a dominance claim meant to corner Alaris into submission or bloodshed. The bond hummed, calm and present, not urging attack, only reminding her she was not alone. Caleb stood beside her, close enough to touch, far enough to respect the line she'd drawn. Sirens faded as authorities ceded space to witnesses. Nixa arrived in a sweep of dark confidence, hair bound tight, eyes bright with hunger. By old law, Nixa declared, voice carrying, I claim the right to challenge. Alaris lifted her chin. I accept, she replied, and the word landed clean. Chalk scraped pavement. Rules were repeated. No killing. Yield ends it. The circle tightened. Alaris inhaled the city's mixed breath and stepped forward, choosing daylight over shadow, truth over fear, and the courage to finish what she began today. Nixa moved first, fast and precise, testing edges, flashing claws. Without committing, Alaris answered with patience, feet light, spine aligned, letting cameras catch restraint. Taunts came sharp, aimed to crack composure. Alaris let them pass. The bond steadied her rhythm, Caleb's presence a quiet metronome at her back. When Nixa fainted left, Alaris slid right, redirecting momentum, refusing the trap. Pain sparked as a blow glanced her shoulder, heat blooming, but she stayed upright. She remembered the alley, the train, the hospital lights. She remembered choosing to stop running. Nixa snarled, frustration bleeding through polish, and charged. Alaris met her cleanly, strength grounded, timing earned. They grappled, breath ragged, boots scraping chalk. A sweep, a counter. The crowd gasped. Alaris felt the opening and took it, locking leverage without crushing, forcing Nixa to the ground. The yield hovered, seconds stretching thin. Nixa resisted, pride burning brighter than reason. Alaris leaned close, voice low and steady. It ends if you choose. Cameras caught the pause, the decision. Nixa's chest heaved. Finally, bitter and bright with hate, she yielded. The circle erupted, sound crashing like surf, law rewritten by consent and restraint before watching eyes. Nixa rose shaking, rage stripped bare. She laughed too loudly, scanning faces, seeking allies who no longer met her gaze. This proves nothing, she spat. Alaris straightened, pain humming, and addressed the crowd. It proves we can choose better, she said simply. Murmurs shifted tone, curiosity turning thoughtful. Authorities stepped in, separating space, documenting everything. Nixa slipped away amid confusion, poison trailing, but diminished now, spectacle spent. Alaris's knees threatened to buckle as adrenaline drained. Caleb was there instantly, a hand at her elbow, steady without claiming. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "We did." Reporters pressed closer, questions tumbling. Alaris answered a few, careful and clear, then stepped back, refusing the hunger for sound bites. The city exhaled. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere else a wolf cried and then fell silent. Balance didn't arrive all at once, but it tilted. Alaris felt it, subtle and real. Choice had teeth. Choice had witnesses. And choice, she learned, could be stronger than any crown forged from fear alone today. By afternoon, messages flooded in. Support, anger, requests for guidance. Alaris sat on the stoop beneath the maple, ice on her shoulder, absorbing the weight of being seen. Maribel brought water and a nod. "Proud of you," she said. And the simplicity nearly undid Alaris. Detective Crow lingered nearby, fielding questions, eyes thoughtful. Eileen called with relief, trembling through her voice. "The court is dissolving old claims," she said, "reforming publicly." Alaris closed her eyes, emotion cresting. Reform meant work. Work meant staying. She looked at Caleb, who watched her with quiet trust. "I don't want to be a symbol," she admitted. He smiled faintly. "Then be a person who shows up." That felt right. As evening softened edges, Alaris addressed a small gathering, not with speeches, but with boundaries. "No forced bonds," she said. "No hunting here. Transparency or leave." Some nodded. Some walked away. That was acceptable. The city's lights flickered on, ordinary and miraculous. Alaris felt tired to the bone, but clean. The chase had narrowed to a point and broken open. Tomorrow would be smaller tasks, slower healing, patient rebuilding. Tonight was enough. She breathed, grounding herself in the here and now, grateful for witnesses who stayed. Night settled gently, carrying the smell of rain and hot pavement. Back in the room, Alaris peeled off the day, muscles aching, spirit steady. Caleb brewed tea, movements careful, familiar. They sat together without rush, sharing quiet like a gift. "Thank you," he said after a while, not for victory, but for trust. She met his gaze, honest. "We keep choosing," she replied. The bond warmed, no longer a pull, simply presence. Outside, the maple leaves whispered, healed bark catching moonlight. Alaris thought of Nix's hunger and felt no triumph, only clarity. Power without consent devoured itself. She stretched, winced, smiled. Tomorrow would bring meetings, questions, maybe setbacks. She was ready. When sleep came, it was deep and untroubled. She dreamed not of running, but of standing in open streets, daylight wide, hands free. In the quiet between breaths, she understood the chase had ended because there was nowhere left to flee from herself. She had chosen ground and claimed it with care, courage, and witnesses enough to keep it honest, learning to live forward without fear. The calm after the challenge felt deceptive, like the quiet eye of a storm. Alaris woke before dawn with the bond buzzing sharp and urgent, a warning she had learned to trust. The city lay hushed, streets, damp lights blinking yellow at empty intersections. She dressed quickly, every sense tuned, wolf pacing beneath her skin. Caleb was already awake, sitting upright, shoulders tense. "She's not done," he said. Alaris nodded. Nixa would never accept loss without rewriting the ending in blood. This time, she wouldn't seek witnesses. She would seek destruction. Alaris felt the weight of responsibility settle heavy and familiar. People had chosen to believe. That made them targets. A message flashed on Alaris's phone. Unknown number, location ping attached. An abandoned riverside warehouse. "Come alone," the text read, and this. Alaris exhaled slowly. "It's a trap," Caleb said. "Yes," she agreed. And it ends today. She left notes for Maribel and Crow, clear and careful. Then she turned to Calum. You don't follow, she said. His jaw tightened. I don't abandon. She met his gaze steadily. You protect what comes after. The bond thrummed with shared fear and trust. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. Alaris stepped into the waking city, heart steady, walking toward the last shadow still clinging to her story. The warehouse loomed like a scar against the river, windows shattered, metal groaning in the wind. Alaris entered alone, boots echoing, the smell of rust and cold water thick in the air. Nixa waited inside the cavernous space, silhouette sharp against broken light. Torin stood nearby, loyalty curdled into desperation. You should have stayed in the forest, Nixa said softly. Alaris didn't stop walking. You dragged this here, she replied. I'm ending it here. Nixa circled, voice slick. You think the city will save you? Humans forget. Wolves don't. Alaris felt fear flicker, then anchor. They remember what's recorded, she said, and what's chosen. Nixa lunged without warning. The fight was brutal and fast, uncontained by chalk or rules. Alaris took a hit to the ribs, pain blooming. Hot, but she stayed upright. She countered, driving Nixa back, refusing to let rage take the wheel. Torin moved then, blade flashing. Alaris dodged barely, heart slamming. This was no trial. This was murder, dressed as pride. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Nixa snarled, realizing time was closing. You could have ruled, she hissed. Alaris struck, hard and clean. I choose to live. The bond flared, bright and steady, as if Calum stood beside her. Alaris fought with precision born of restraint, not fury. Nixa faltered, wounded and wild, desperation cracking her mask. Torin hesitated, glancing toward the river, toward escape. Alaris used the opening, forcing Nixa back against a steel beam, leverage locked, breath ragged. Yield, Alaris said, voice shaking but firm. Nixa laughed, blood bright on her teeth. Never! She surged again, reckless. Alaris twisted aside and Nixa stumbled, momentum betraying her. The fall was fast, a slip on wet concrete, a scream, cut short by the river's roar below. Silence slammed down hard. Torin froze, horror draining his face. He dropped the blade and fled. Alaris staggered back, knees buckling, shock crashing through her. She sank to the floor, shaking, staring at the empty space where Nixa had stood. She hadn't killed her. She hadn't chased. She had chosen restraint. The outcome didn't change that. Sirens grew louder. Footsteps pounded. Crow burst in with officers, weapons raised, then lowered at the sight of Alaris alone, bloodied and breathing. It's over, she whispered, unsure who she was telling. The aftermath blurred into statements and blankets and hands guiding her outside. Dawn broke pink over the river, indifferent and beautiful. Calum appeared through the crowd, fear naked on his face. He reached her and held her without hesitation, grounding her shaking body. You're here, he murmured, voice breaking. She nodded, tears finally spilling, grief and relief tangled tight. She chose the edge, Alaris said hoarsely. I chose to stop. Crow listened nearby, expression grave but respectful. This ends the pursuit, he said. For both worlds. News spread fast, ugly and honest. Nixa's fall became the final punctuation to an era of forced power. Wolves scattered, some mourning, some relieved. The court issued a final statement dissolving old dominance laws entirely. Alaris felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a deep, aching quiet. Power taken by fear always demanded blood. Power released by choice left scars, but space to heal. As the sun climbed, she realized the chase that had defined her life was truly finished. They returned home slowly, the city feeling different, wider. Maribel cried and hugged them both. Eileen called, voice raw. It's done, she said. Alaris sat beneath the maple, wrapped in a blanket, watching leaves stir. Caleb knelt beside her, eyes searching. I almost followed, he admitted. She smiled faintly. You protected the future. The bond warmed, settled, complete without closing doors. That night, sleep came heavy and dreamless. Alaris woke once, listening to shared breathing, the ordinary miracle of being alive after choosing restraint in a world that rewarded cruelty. Tomorrow would bring rebuilding, grief, questions. She would face them. She had learned she could. The story was nearly finished, not with victory songs, but with a woman who ran, stopped, stood, and chose life again. Morning arrived clean and ordinary, as if the world had agreed to let Alaris begin again. She woke to the sound of traffic and birds, to sunlight warming the maple leaves outside the window. Her body ached, but the ache felt earned, not hollow. News feeds murmured quietly from a phone on the table, speaking of an accident, an investigation closed, a line finally drawn, no names spoken, no monsters described. Alaris breathed easier for that mercy. She dressed slowly, choosing comfort over armor, and stepped into the kitchen where Maribel hummed and poured tea without questions. The bond rested like a gentle weight, present without pulling. Caleb joined her, eyes soft, healing nearly complete, scars already fading into history. They shared a look that held gratitude and grief together, then ate in silence that felt kind. Outside, the city moved on, stubborn and alive, proof that endings did not require collapse. Alaris felt the future waiting, not demanding, simply open. She had chased it once in fear. Now it stood still, offering itself without chains, asking only that she step forward honestly. Today promised rebuilding, patience, and courage practiced daily, with love chosen freely at every step together now. They walked later to the river, not to mourn but to mark an ending. Alaris stood at the rail, breathing cool air, letting memory pass without gripping. Caleb stayed beside her, steady, no longer guarding, simply present. They spoke about practical things, work hours, rent, meetings with those who wanted reform. Ordinary plans stitched meaning back into days. Aline called with updates, relief and resolve braided in her voice. Protections were written, borders clarified, transparency demanded. Wolves would live among humans by consent, not secrecy. Some would leave, some would stay, choice again. Crow stopped by briefly, offering a nod, a boundary respected. Live well, he said, and meant it. Alaris thanked him, surprising herself with ease. At the cafe, Jonah grinned and slid her an apron, normalcy like a gift. She poured coffee, listened to stories, felt her shoulders drop. When a child laughed, the sound didn't twist her chest anymore. It warmed it. At sunset, Alaris and Caleb returned home, hands brushing, smiles small. The bond felt complete, not because it bound, but because it allowed space. That night they talked of love without ceremony, agreeing to choose each other tomorrow, and tomorrow again. Forever felt unnecessary promises. Rebuilding was not dramatic. It was lists, schedules, apologies, and patience, practiced when no one watched. Alaris met with small groups, listened more than she spoke, and learned when to step back. Authority without dominance required humility she was still earning. Caleb supported without leading, correcting gently when asked, refusing the old posture of command. Together they designed boundaries that protected choice, safety, and truth. Some days hurt, some days healed. When anger flared online, Alaris answered once, then returned to work. When grief arrived unexpectedly, she allowed it space. She learned that courage could be quiet. The maple outside shed leaves and grew them back, seasons proving endurance. One afternoon, Kessari visited with questions and hope, and Alaris felt the future take shape in small hands and bright eyes. She smiled, answering honestly. The bond remained steady through it all, a companion rather than a compass. Love grew not from heat, but from trust, maintained daily. At night, Alaris slept deeply, dreams free of alleys and trains. When she woke, she remembered who she was, a woman who ran, returned, and chose to stay, grounded in daylight. Her breath finally matched her life. Peace arrived slowly, then stayed there. Months later, the city hosted a quiet gathering by the river. Not a ceremony, simply acknowledgement. Alaris spoke briefly, thanked witnesses, named mistakes, and stepped aside. Others spoke after, voices varied and brave. Reform lived when shared. Calum watched from the crowd, pride soft and private. When it ended, they walked home under ordinary stars, laughter drifting from open windows. Alaris felt no pull to run, no urge to hide. The human world and the wolf world overlapped gently now, imperfect and honest. She worked, loved, argued, forgave. The bond adapted, mirroring growth, never demanding proof. When fear visited, she welcomed it, then let it go. Strength, she learned, was allowing life to be complicated. One evening, Calum asked if she wanted forever. She laughed, kissed his cheek, and said she wanted tomorrow. He smiled, understanding everything. They planted herbs on the sill, adopted routines, missed each other during long days, reunited with relief. The chase had become a walk side by side. Destiny had softened into choice. Alaris felt rich with time. Hope settled into ordinary mornings, steady work, shared meals, and evenings that asked nothing beyond presence and care for one another, every single day without fear remaining. The story ended without a crown, without chains, without applause demanding repetition. It ended with Alaris choosing herself and choosing love that followed without forcing. She remembered the alley in the rain, the train doors closing, the fear that once ruled her steps. Those memories no longer chased her. They taught her. When children asked why wolves lived openly now, she answered with honesty and kindness. When skeptics doubted, she listened, then lived well. Calum remained, not as shadow or guard, but as partner. Laughter easy, patience practiced. Together they built a life sturdy enough to hold storms. On the anniversary of the night she ran, Alaris walked the same street at dusk and felt only gratitude. The city lights glowed like constellations brought down to earth. She smiled, breathed deeply, and turned home. If anyone asked how the chase ended, the answer was simple. She stopped running, he kept choosing, and the world made room. The future opened because courage stood still. Love followed, and for once nothing needed to chase them again. That was the ending they earned, quiet and strong, built from choice, truth, witnesses, and the courage to stay when fear finally released its grip completely. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Like this video, subscribe for more emotionally gripping stories, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and choosing love over fear. Tell me in the comments, what moment hit you the hardest, and if you'd like a sequel or a brand new story next. Your support is how these stories keep finding their way to you.